In the headlines on this Monday, an unusually high level of fine yellow dust from China blanketed the skies above much of Korea all throughout the day. Some parts of Korea will see yellow dust particles until tomorrow. Media reports say Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will likely address the U.S. Congress when he travels to Washington in April or May. Korean Americans in the U.S. are opposed to the move. Alejandro Inarritu's Birdman wins 4 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director at this year's awards ceremony. Stay tuned for these stories and more coming right up. Hello and welcome everyone. This is Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Nai Hyun-kyung.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. We begin with the conditions outside. First, we saw very gray and hazy skies above Korea today.
That's right. A yellow dust advisory is still in effect for parts of Korea, including right here in Seoul, and the levels of fine dust particles have also been pretty high.
Pretty high indeed. For the latest, let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle?
Hello, Hyun-kyung and Daniel. According to the Korea Meteorological Administration, the high pollution levels today are due to the combination of dust particles blowing in from China and the Gobi Desert in Mongolia on a strong northwest wind. Now, if you have a look at the current levels, they are about 10 times higher than the normal. And along with the yellow dust advisory in effect all across the nation, the ultra-fine dust adds to the air, making the condition worse. So try to stay indoors if possible, or make sure to wear a mask when you're heading outside. Well, that's all for now. I'll be back with more updates later in the newscast.
Well, if you're in Korea, don't go cheap on the mask and goggles. It does affect your health and work directly. It's a major problem because it really can take a toll on your entire week.
That's right. It can cause a whole range of issues from minor eye irritation to serious respiratory problems. That's one of the reasons why officials in Seoul have been working with authorities in Beijing to tackle this very problem.
For more, we turn to our Lee Ji-yoon.
It's the worst yellow dust storm in more than 4 years. The Korea Meteorological Administration issued yellow dust warnings in Seoul and other major cities throughout Korea this Monday morning. Every year, this unhealthy yellow haze drifts from China and Mongolia, carrying with it industrial pollutants and bacteria, none of which are good for your respiratory health. In response, weather authorities here advise people to stay indoors and wear a protective mask and goggles when going outside. But some might ask, why can't we stop the dust from drifting into Korea? What has been done to make this unwelcome guest go away? Korea and China have been working together for over a decade to fight the yellow dust. Public and private groups from both countries have been planting more trees in the deserts of China and Mongolia to slow desertification. The two countries have also established working groups to research ways to counter rising levels of dust pollution and installed high-tech air monitoring equipment. During an environment ministers meeting between China, Japan, and Korea last year, the ministers talked about each other's environmental policies and agreed to work together to tackle various environmental issues, with improving air quality topping the list. But experts say these efforts are being overwhelmed by China's enormous population and industries that still rely heavily on coal, leading to more air pollution. They say it's time for China to actively develop clean energy to use in place of coal, and for its neighboring countries like Korea to better cooperate with China, as environmental problems like yellow dust have consequences that reach far beyond the borders of any one country. Lee Ji-yoon, Arirang News.
And in other news, we're following various media outlets are reporting that Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will likely address the U.S. Congress when he travels to Washington in a couple of months. But Korean Americans in the U.S. are resisting the move, saying he needs to first apologize for Tokyo's past wartime atrocities. For more, here's Son Jung-in.
A source familiar with the issue says Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will likely give a speech before U.S. Congress during his planned visit to Washington in late April or early May. The source said Abe strongly expressed his will to a congressional delegation from the U.S. who recently visited Tokyo. Many U.S. congressional leaders, including House Speaker John Boehner, are known to be leaning toward letting Abe speak to Congress. If Abe gets the green light, it will mark the first time a Japanese prime minister has addressed U.S. Congress in 54 years. Former Prime Minister Hayato Ikeda was the last Japanese leader to give a speech before the House of Representatives all the way back in 1961. Before that, Nobusuke Kishi addressed Congress in 1957 and Shigeru Yoshida in 1954. Abe reportedly wants to speak before a joint session of the lower and upper house, something no Japanese prime minister has ever done before. However, some obstacles stand in his way. Many Korean Americans are opposed to Abe's move as he's expected to promote Japan as a country that has followed a peaceful path since the end of World War II. A task force for a Korean council in Washington for women drafted for military sexual slavery by Japan said they launched a petition campaign on Sunday. They will submit a formal letter to California Congressman Ed Royce saying they're opposed to the idea unless Abe makes a sincere apology over Japan's historical wrongdoings first. 손정인, Arirang News.
And staying with Japan, but on a different topic, Korea has further protested Japan's latest territorial claim to Korea's Dokdo Island. This morning, Korea's foreign ministry summoned Kenji Kanazuki, a minister at the Japanese embassy in Seoul, to protest Japan's celebrations of its Takeshima Day. Takeshima is what Japan calls Dokdo. For the third straight year, the Japanese government dispatched a senior official to Shimane Prefecture to attend the event. Korea denounced the move on Sunday, calling it historically regressive, adding that it raises doubts about Tokyo's sincerity to strengthen ties with Seoul.
We shift our focus to inter-Korean relations now. South Korea has reiterated its call for dialogue with North Korea just days after the regime is believed to have led live fire drills near the inter-Korean maritime border. But Pyongyang says it won't sit down for talks unless Seoul calls off its upcoming joint military drills with Washington. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
South Korea on Monday urged North Korea to drop any military provocations that could disturb peace on the Korean peninsula. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un reportedly inspected live fire drills near the inter-Korean maritime border during the Lunar New Year holiday last week. Seoul's Unification Ministry responded by reiterating its call for dialogue.
Regardless of the current situation, we remain open to inter-Korean talks.
North Korea issued a series of threats ahead of the annual joint military exercises between South Korea and the United States, scheduled for early March. The North state-run Rodong-Sinmun newspaper said Monday that if South Korea conducts its rehearsal for invading the North with the U.S., South Korean waters will become a site of death. Although Seoul and Washington say the drills are defensive in nature, Pyongyang views them as a practice for war. The paper reiterated that South Korea must end all military hostilities, including the upcoming exercises, if it is sincere about improving inter-Korean ties. North Korea has yet to accept South Korea's offer for talks made nearly 2 months ago. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the U.S. is standing by its position of seeking dialogue with North Korea while firmly responding to the regime's provocations. But North Korea watchers say issues in other parts of the world may be diverting Washington's attention away from Pyongyang. Our Choi Yu-sun has this story.
At the start of 2015, Washington slapped additional sanctions on Pyongyang for its alleged hacking of Sony Pictures late last year. In a State of the Union address later in the same month, however, President Barack Obama excluded any reference to North Korea. Then came the U.S. president's controversial YouTube interview in which he said the North Korean regime will eventually collapse as the internet penetrates further into the reclusive country.
And it is very hard to sustain that kind of brutal authoritarian regime in this modern world.
The State Department's official overseeing East Asian affairs days later said that bringing change to North Korea doesn't necessarily involve a collapse of the current leadership.
The fact of the matter is, we don't have a hostile policy. We have a denuclearization policy.
Washington's point man on North Korea, Sung Kim, reportedly failed at a recent attempt to engage with the North in a third country. While Kim has said the U.S. has always taken a two-track approach of enforcing sanctions and keeping the door to dialogue open, it seemed odd for the administration to make such a conciliatory gesture immediately after imposing new sanctions. Analysts suggest with the latest proposal, the administration sought to hold the North accountable for the impasse rather than actually resume talks. North Korea chumming up with Russia as of late is also not a welcome development for the U.S., especially as Moscow has invited both the South and North Korean leaders to its World War II commemorative ceremony in May. And that, according to some analysts, prompted President Obama to cause a stir. All in all, crises in the Middle East and Ukraine, along with prolonged deadlock in the North Korean issue, are thought to have diverted the White House's attention away from Pyongyang. 최유선, Arirang News.
Elsewhere around our globe, a peace march to commemorate the one-year anniversary of Ukraine's uprising turned deadly over the weekend. A bomb explosion killed at least 2 people and injured several others. Our Connie Kim reports.
Unrest is spreading across Ukraine after a deadly explosion rocked the northeastern city of Lviv on Sunday. At least 2 people were killed and more than 10 were wounded in the blast at a peace rally marking 1 year since the uprising that ultimately toppled the Russia-backed government of Viktor Yanukovych. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko says the bombing was aimed at destabilizing the country.
Our opponents, our enemies, have tried to destabilize the situation in the country. As you know, there was an act of terrorism in Lviv, and our special security services were able to prevent an act of terrorism in Odessa.
Sunday's march was to commemorate the 100 people who were killed during last February's uprising and the more than 5,000 who have lost their lives in the subsequent crisis in eastern Ukraine. 4 people have been arrested in connection to the bomb attack. Kiev says all the suspects have links to Russia and received instructions and weapons from the Russian Federation. Moscow has yet to respond to the accusations. The Ukrainian government is becoming increasingly concerned that pro-Russian forces are moving beyond regions held by separatists. Lviv is Ukraine's second city and has been the site of violent protests by separatists over the past year. Hours prior to the explosion, the Ukrainian government and pro-Russian separatists agreed to pull back heavy military equipment this week, following a deadline set during peace talks in Belarus earlier this month. Also, in the first and rare sign of progress toward implementation of the peace deal, the first prisoner swap of roughly 200 men took place over the weekend. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Well, in this week's Industry Insight, we are going to talk about the nation's casino industry.
Casino. Are you a gambler?
Well, no, not so much, no.
Yeah, I don't know when to fold them and when to hold them, but certainly the Korean government seems to know when to do what. They believe the sector will greatly contribute to attracting more tourists and encourage spending.
So 2 additional casinos are likely to be built in the nation's free economic zones, and this time the Korean government is allowing Korean firms to take part in the bidding.
For more, we have our Kim Ji-yeon with this report.
Will the opening of resort complexes equipped with hotels, shops, and casinos bring investment and boost the economy? The Korean government is betting it will. It believes it can raise $1.8 billion from the casino industry. Now it's letting Korean companies get in on the bidding, a privilege once reserved for foreign investors. Just last month, the Ministry of Strategy and Finance gave the green light to the development of 2 additional foreigner-only casino and resort complexes in the country's free economic zones. It plans to select the 2 licensees by 2020. Already, the country has attracted investors for 2 complexes on Yeongjongdo Island located in the western city of Incheon. The Korea-based Paradise Group and the multinational casino firm Caesars Entertainment Corporation are each building a resort complex there. Both are seeking to be the Korean version of Singapore's Marina Bay Sands, which raised $5.4 billion in sales last year. But challenges lie ahead if they're to survive in the competition against the massive casino casino and resort complexes in Macau and Okinawa. But mainly, there's a China risk factor. The income of casinos in Korea is heavily reliant on visiting Chinese tourists. That's because the Korean government currently bans its nationals from all casinos except one. The casino in northeastern Gangwon-do province, Gangwon-land, is the only one Korean nationals can go to. The other 16 casinos rely on those with foreign passports. The tourism ministry says the combined sales of foreigner-only casinos is at $1.2 billion, similar to that of Gangwon-land.
The restriction placed on Korean nationals will affect the competitiveness of the Korean casino industry. The scale and amount of investment in the resort complexes is going to be smaller than in other neighboring countries.
Korea is capping investments in its complexes at $900 million a year, a figure far below that of its rivals. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping is increasingly trying to root out gambling as part of an anti-corruption campaign. That has raised fears the Chinese government will restrict its nationals from gambling, both home and abroad. Kim Jung, Arirang News.
Business partners face a one-day entry ban.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Na Hyung-kyung and Daniel Che.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
Korea's shipbuilding industry was once one of the major driving forces for the country's economic growth, but a recent OECD report says the sector is now posing a threat to the economy. Kim Min-ji explains.
Korea's shipbuilding industry is facing serious challenges to getting itself back on solid footing. This according to a recent OECD report that says the global economic crisis has dented the industry's finances. The profitability, or EBITDA, on sales of publicly traded Korean shipbuilders stood at around 5% in 2012, in contrast to the 11% in 2008. EBITDA refers to the earnings before the deduction of interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization expenses. The figure also falls short of the levels recorded by companies in Japan, China, and Germany. The OECD report also points out that the ability of Korean shipbuilders to generate enough profit to cover their debts has declined significantly since 2007. It says while their average debt levels were less than 1.5 times larger than their profit in 2007, the ratio was above 6 in 2012. To be financially stable, a company's debt level should not be more than 3 times its profit. The shipbuilders' weak performance has also led to more government involvement, with government agencies increasing their ownership role in the industry and taking on more risk. If the situation were to continue, the report warns it could have an impact on employment and the financial sector, which could result in a domino effect on the economy as a whole. In dealing with the aftermath of the crisis, the report says the government needs to maintain a level playing field between public and private entities and manage its risks. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
And on to some tech news. The Mobile World Congress opens next week in Barcelona. For those who are not familiar, this is one of the main places where you can catch the latest trends in telecom gadgets and technologies. Strategy Analytics has listed Samsung's latest Galaxy smartphone as one of the key gadgets to keep an eye out for. Samsung is set to unveil the Galaxy S6 to the public on March 1st, a day before the official opening of the event. The research firm also says smartwatches will garner a lot of attention at this year's Mobile World Congress. Samsung and LG are expected to unveil their latest smartwatches ahead of the release of the Apple Watch in April.
Well, Korea has come a long way, certainly around the world. People stopped asking the questions, are you from North or South Korea? Less of that question these days, that's for sure. But how does the world view Korea today, 60 plus years after the Korean War? There were definitely some good traits about Koreans and their society. But of course, it was undeniable that some negative aspects were there as well. Our Connie Lee has her fingers on the pulse.
So how do you view Koreans? A new survey of about 1,100 foreigners in Korea and abroad reveals both the good and the not-so-good perceptions of Koreans in the world. The survey, conducted by Korea's Institute for International Trade and reported by the Gyeongyang Shinmun, asked foreigners for their insights. Let's take a look, first at the good. Koreans are seen as hardworking, with more than 21% of the people surveyed saying so. Then they're seen as kind and patriotic. On the flip side, though, a not-so-good perception of Koreans is that they're too pressed for time or rushed, while 14% see Koreans as too prideful, and 12% see them as unsociable. So if Koreans are seen this way, let's take a look at how Korean society is viewed. The survey points out the merits of Korea's good customer service, the nation's unified spirit, and Korea's dynamic social scenes. But to the bad parts of Korean society, more than 30% of foreigners say it's too competitive, while what they characterize as Korea's attitude of superiority is also seen as a flaw. And while the term 빨리빨리, or quickly is emphasized here in Korea, it is also seen by the world as a negative. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Enough good traits to neutralize the bad, I hope, was displayed there. Sometimes a message is more powerful seen, not heard, some people would say. A world-renowned contemporary artist is aiming to send a message through her art with a new solo exhibition that just opened here in Seoul. Our Im Yoon-hee takes us there.
These straw creations look almost like a hut, reminiscent of a nomadic life, one enveloped in nature. But these works are actually scaled-down straw recreations of famous religious architectural structures from around the world. Artist Yang Hae-gyu is one of Korea's most successful contemporary artists, with exhibitions held around the world. And for the first time in over 5 years, she's having a solo exhibition in Seoul, with brand new works revealing her abstract views on nature, humankind, and the relationship between the two. I don't know if it's a strong curiosity or genuine feeling, but I hope people see this as an opportunity to see what drives my work.
The exhibition features a collection of works spanning her long, successful career. She's most recognized for taking everyday, mundane objects and using them in her own imaginative way.
As the artist mentioned, the theme here is Mother Nature and humanity and how it can be restored.
The exhibition, titled Shooting the Elephant, Thinking the Elephant, brings together multiple works, many rarely showcased in Korea, for a unique look at the development of the artist's career. But one thing stayed consistent, and that's the abstract complexity of artist Yang's works. Each piece requires an open mind and a willing imagination. Im Yoon-hee, Arirang News.
It's that time of the year in Hollywood.
Indeed.
Drum roll, please. And the Oscar goes to, I would like to thank the Academy, all the words we've heard before. And of course, this year's Oscar ceremony has just come to an end. And the Academy Award gives out the award to what the Academy Award feels are deserving of the awards.
The best,
but
right?
Of course, filmmakers and film buffs might disagree with some of the winners or nominations.
Well, nevertheless, and the film Birdman this year took the top prize, the dark comedy about a struggling actor, and the film got the highest recognition on Sunday, winning the Academy Award for Best Picture.
Also, back-to-back victory for Mexican directors. Best Director Award went to director Alejandro Inarritu, who created that movie, and he thanked the audience for watching what he calls his crazy film.
That's the direct quote from the director there. And top honors also went to Julianne Moore, who was named Best Actress for her role in Still Alice, and Eddie Redmayne, who won his first Oscar with the Best Actor award for his breakout role as physicist Stephen Hawking in the biopic The Theory of Everything.
Good evening, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. A thick layer of yellow dust continues to blanket Korea, but the good news is that the levels are going down and we can expect the levels to return to normal by tomorrow. However, the skies are looking generally clear and we are expecting the same for tomorrow. And with that in mind, let's go over to our readings for tomorrow as well. Seoul will top out to Tuesday morning at -3 and gets up to 7 in the afternoon, while Daegu and Busan will top out at 11 and 10 degrees. And to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 10, Dokdo hits to 6 degrees, while Mankungang drops low to -4. Well, that's all for now, Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for that, Michelle. I'm still on Oscar mode. I do congratulate J.K. Simmons for getting what he deserved, and I wish Benedict Cumberbatch would have won Best Actor over Redmayne. But nonetheless, that's just my take.
Yes, your opinion, but much appreciated.
Thank you for that. And that's all we have for you at this hour. Thank you for staying with us. To our viewers in different time zones, have a wonderful day. This has been Daniel Choi.
And I'm Na Hyun-kyung. To our viewers in Korea, have a great rest of the evening. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.